Well, welcome, friends. It's time for another dialogue where we are diving in headfirst into this conversation called Lighting the Candle, A World That Works. We've been exploring language, we've been exploring empowerment, engagement, enlightenment, every kind of E word that you can think of. And today, for your entertainment and also for your thought value, and maybe to give you a place where you can look out a window in your mind and see a brighter future. Today, we're going to go with a P word. We're going to just dive right into the whole idea of possibility. And I know that these two folks that are on with me are black belts in not only generating possibility, but putting possibility in place of no possibility. So with that said, I'm Bill Carell. Welcome, and let's hand it over to Lisa. You can tell them briefly who you are and maybe say a few words, about what possibility means to you.
Lisa Sheehan, been in media, some form or another, my whole life, and now I co-publish Epic Magazine, which stands for Empowering People, Inspiring Communities. So I guess from that title alone, you could tell I believe in possibilities. I think I've always been that way, and I've also been studying See No. This woman that wrote See No Stranger is doing like an online course right now, and one of her favorite terms is, and part of her curriculum, so to speak, is to reimagine. So I connect that with possibilities too. So if you can reimagine, if you can't see something differently, then try to reimagine it. So does something need rearranging or dismantling? But where's the possibility? How can you see the possibility? And the other thing I think we've talked about before is always have a safe container to talk about these things in. Because without that, people just will hide back and not express their idea of possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
That's my little 2 cents lead in.
That's good to get us kicked off. Ken?
So I'm Ken Caputo, and that's perfect because as Quester's Way, that's what I'm the founder of, is a concept that's based on creating that safe space where people can feel comfortable with the idea of exploring their possibilities. And, the only mistake there is not learning, and, out of the box thinking and creative ideas are embraced and welcomed. And, to me, possibility is just, it's something that occurs when you create fertile ground for what currently exists to expand into something new. So, and it feels like so much of the conversation right now could be possibility lies in how do we convert it into more fertile ground where it becomes safe for us to explore the possibilities of the world around us.
Great. Anything else?
Nope.
Okay. So what's really interesting is that most people, when they hear possibility or what's possible, they think of it in terms of from here. Like whatever's going on in your life that you either like or don't like, how can you alter that and make something else possible? And one of the neat things, it's actually a discipline, is to remove yourself from the experience of whatever is working or not working. And it's coming from the Buddhist idea of attachment, that wherever we are right now, comfortable or uncomfortable, it's familiar. And so therefore, almost everything that we can think of is going to be referenced to that thinking, to that mindset of whatever is here, simply because we don't have a second or a third-hand report from out there in terms of what our interpretation of what's going on right now. We only have that one experience that we're experiencing out of an infinite number of possibilities in each and every moment. So the whole idea is to create this clearing, is to create something that's open, like a blank sheet of paper, or a brand new windshield. If you could clear all of the bugs and all of the salt and dirt spray off of your windshield and have this brand new windshield for a minute where everything is is completely visible to you, and any possibility that you want to stand for can then become possible. So in terms of it being bigger, better, or any kind of reference to what was, possibility in terms of how I'm speaking it right now lives in its own domain. And you've heard probably the field of infinite possibilities, Deepak Chopra, the field of all that's possible and impossible, where it takes in absolutely everything that is out there, and that over time there is nothing impossible if the thinking is strong enough, if the actions are strong enough. So the neat part of it is, most of the time we have these things called breakthroughs, and typically they're accidental. They're, where we're grinding, all of a sudden something happens. It's kind of like how lucite was invented, that clear, hard plastic at DuPont that they made billions off of. That was an experimental failure. They were trying to do something completely different, and all of a sudden, they could lift up, the beaker, with the stirrer, and it was all solid. And it was like, what's that? That's kind of cool. How can we do it again? So breakthroughs, as we have them in our lives, where something works, seems almost accidental in many cases. But what if it were possible, like that whole domain of possibility, that you can plan breakthroughs, that you can instruct yourself that breakthroughs are not something that are accidental or random. It's a technology that you can actually place yourself at work in. And what if that were possible? What if that really could happen? How would that look in the world? That's my 2.5-minute diatribe.
I think the other aspect of it to me is to bounce ideas just on yourself. It gets a little redundant and it's kind of like one-sided, obviously. And so to practice these things in community, I think, is the important part too. So to express these ideals and not necessarily in an echo chamber either, to get out there and see what other people think. Because like they say, together is the only way things are. Was that I just wrote that phrase, that quote about small groups can make changes. In fact, it's the only thing that has.
Yes.
Margaret Mead said it. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has.
It has to start somewhere. It's the whole pebble in the pond approach. Who initiates the pebble? Well, you had to get the pebble from someplace or somebody in the first place to cast it back into the water. But the more pebbles going into the water, the more ripples, the more people. It's that's one of the best minds that the humanity's ever known, in my opinion. I think Margaret Mead was way ahead of her time in a lot of areas, but she was right there with her contemporaries, like all of the self-help folks. So in terms of making this the word discipline implies that there's a formula to it. However, the formula may be just what you do to prepare a space, as opposed to when you're in that space, do you do anything actively to make possibility happen? Is there like a point and shoot kind of a thing to it, or how does it work?
Well, our approach is to invest in practices that start paying immediate interest. So, and that's the whole Questor's Way was built around move, think, connect, fuel, empower. So, move your body every day in some way that's enjoyable and beneficial to you. And when you need it, it will be there for you. Explore something that's, a new way of thinking, a new way of developing your brain, which, neuroplasticity, they now know our brain can continue to strengthen and grow forever, for as long as we live. It doesn't reach a point of stasis, that doing that in advance is going to give you the knowledge and potential wisdom to explore those possibilities when they come up. So so in each of those things, it's not oh, I just had a heart attack, I better change my diet. It's how do I fuel my body in a way that's going to lead to a healthy heart. and then even if I do have a heart attack, I'll be one up because I'll be in better shape to be able to recover from it. So, and it's interesting. I think that just it's, I think it's just human to be in a state of reaction instead of proaction.
Yeah.
So it's things happen and we're responding to them. So we're always playing catch up instead of just committing, regardless of what's going on, to things that are good for us, things that add value to us in service to something greater than ourselves. It's funny that drop a pebble, make some ripples is like, that's been a thing that we've, kind of used as a mantra for almost 30 years now.
Yeah.
And one of the things we would do teacher training, and you'd have a group of 30 or 40 of us, a martial arts school, and we would literally all hold a pebble in our hand, and we would turn our hand and we'd let it go all at the same time. It all hit the mats and you could feel it. It was like such a cool feeling. And one of the things we talked about is we already have the thing, and it's literally the act of just releasing it that creates the point of impact and the ripple spread. So, we all have these pebbles, and I think sometimes we're not in that safe space that Lisa was talking about, to be brave enough to just let it go and allow an impact to occur. So it just, for me, it seems like it comes back to that safe space idea.
I think what you also said, the preparation, the building the muscle in advance of needing it. There's another truism, in business that says if you do the things you ought to do when you ought to do them, you'll be able to do the things you want to do when you want to do them. Okay. Mm-hmm. So you're building capacity, during downtime, you're preparing for uptime. And it's a thoughtful person that takes all of those areas in their life, takes them for something more than granted, like this is how it is and it's always going to be this way. Well, there's no possibility in a sentence like that. Is this what you want? Is this what you're living with? Is this what your life is for? Have you ever sat down and figured out the purpose or an intention that you could put into the purpose of your life? Now, we lived in a generation, I think all three of us, where I knew kids that got out of high school and they didn't get a job for 2 or 3 years because they were out in the world trying to find themselves, as opposed to going through some serious practices to sit down and decide through experience what they enjoyed doing, or what sorts of things felt like they were an intention that had always been there that they could reconnect with in a powerful way and have a direction in their life that wasn't possible before they did the work. So in many cases, I had 2 friends that went out of high school, and I don't know, do you remember what was his name? Sun Myung Moon, the prophet. He was a dyed-in-the-wool cult, and there were literally hundreds of them in the early 1970s, and they were called Moonies. Okay, so we had the Krishnas you could go and get involved with. They had the Moonies, or you could go and get involved with one of the SDS type groups, or the Black Panthers, or whatever. Not all of us could join that group, but the point is in terms of finding their way, they were looking for some sort of dogmatic approach to life that they could adopt and take on as their own until they found out that it didn't really fit them. As opposed to another approach, which Ken, you and I know, and I think Lisa knows as well, we could teach this in school. We could actually give people the muscle at building muscle, in terms of who they are in the matter of their own life. What is your life going to be for? What can you dedicate yourself to? And I don't mean dedicate yourself like, becoming a doctor and 12 more years of schooling. It might be more like dedicating yourself as a decent human being, as somebody who's caring and loving and takes care of the rest of the world when possible, and is always casting a good shadow and never a dark shadow. So that's kind of like what I see as the next evolutionary step here where we live, and probably around the world, because it just seems, especially during COVID, the world has gotten so much smaller. we're all experiencing this thing worldwide. There's nobody who's getting out free, you know. Some are saying that they are. You know, the Chinese, they only had 4,500 cases, so what the heck are they doing so well? Anyway, you can manage the conversation or you can manage what's actually happening in the world. And that's very interesting to me. Any thoughts?
Well, I was going to reflect on, well, like Ken said, bravery is definitely needed moving forward. Just in even joining communities. But the other thing was that imagination is the new currency. And like you were talking, Bill, or even the original pebble being thrown, somebody's got to come up with the idea, and they're all out there. It's just taking the time and going within and being in community to create these new ideas, because everything that's in the planet, in the world, was an idea at some point. Somebody made real. So that's what we need, is people, thinkers and doers, and brave applicators.
It really does work like sonar, you know, where you send out a ping and you're not going to get a ping back from every location that receives the ping. But do you guys remember the Police Message in a Bottle, that song from 1982 or 1983? And the end result of it was 100 million bottles on the shore I see, you know. So you cast a bottle with a message in it out into then holy crap, all of a sudden the rest of the world is sending messages in a bottle as well. Does it work that way? Is there like a tipping point where people finally say, we're at a point, as my French teacher would say, beyond which up with which I cannot put, you know? You know, that at some point, it's just all of a sudden, expression has to be there. It has to be there in a very powerful form.
Yeah, Malcolm Gladwell wrote about that.
Yeah.
You know, he had that book, he did Blink, but then Tipping Point was one of those books, and how that happens. And I can remember, I wish I could find it again. It was a study done a few years ago, and it was kind of a global thing, and it was about looking at populations, whether it was a company or a country, and what percentage of the population needed to adopt a new idea before it tipped into acceptability. Yeah. And the percentage was only 10%. It wasn't a big percentage. And it was interesting because we applied that working in schools. Like if you wanted to create a more positive culture in a classroom, for example, if there were 20 students and you found 2 or 3 that would champion it, it tipped. It was just crazy how that would, how that would happen. It wasn't a big number. And, what struck me as Lisa was talking, I think the companion to bravery is discernment, because there's so much noise right now. So it's piercing through that and seeing something that aligns with the actual possibility you're looking to create and what you're being brave about releasing, so it goes someplace where there's the fertile ground, because seeds don't grow everywhere. They grow in the right environment. And, it's interesting how I found myself over time being, inadvertently trying to plant seeds in the loudest environment, or the one that was telling me that this is where you should plant it, instead of thinking a little bit more critically and assessing the situation and saying no a lot more, until you find the right area to plant your seed,
Absolutely. And if you think about it, those folks that are busy creating the fertile ground, for these possibilities to grow, it has nothing to do with memorization. It has everything to do with the word that you used, the critical thinking element, mm-hmm. which is something that in the old days, I mean, even when I was going to school, there were many of my school teachers, in primary school and then in junior high school, that would reward open conversation that wasn't fact-based. You know, they would basically say, and we would practice debating. We would practice debating with no other information than 2 points of view. There's this point and there's this point. And I had this social studies teacher who was a great history teacher as well, Leo Savoy. And he was very, very comedic in his approach to things. But what he always said was, there's always 3 points of view. There's your point of view, there's the other person's point of view, and then there's all the other possible points of view that neither of you are seeing. Mm-hmm. So the point of a debate is not to win and score points in terms of your view being better, but it's for your argument to be better. And if you can articulate a very strong argument for either case, then you have a chance to be able to find those other possibilities where there's common ground. But if you're not willing to set things aside and to work very hard and not just understanding the other point of view, when you can argue for the point of view at the beginning of the conversation that you just couldn't even tolerate, you know, the sound of it made you sick to your stomach. But if you could be in that position, in that place, to be able to effectively argue for, that's the best way to demonstrate to somebody that you understand. And so that's something that I came out of, you know, 8th grade with this experience, with somebody who basically said, well, now who wants to volunteer to go next, you know? And we would do this like once a week for a half hour. And he basically said, I don't care what your arguments are. I want you to believe in them. I want you to believe in your arguments with the very last bit of your being and your spirit. And somebody said, why?
I was going to ask you what the outcome for you was.
Well, what his answer was, he said, I wouldn't tell you if I could. And then somebody else said, it might have been me, I don't feel this alive in any other conversation. And he looked over and he just smiled ear to ear and said nothing more. So obviously he was trained how to do that. It might have been a college professor, you know, that gave him these tools to pass on to 8th graders. I mean, can you even imagine? Is this a typical scenario where a teacher in you know, our school system would be blocking out a half hour a week for people to stand up and argue with each other in a very safe space sort of way? Would it even be valuable? Would it even be valuable?
I think there's always value in healthy debate. You know, I mean, I guess the question is, are you doing it to learn how to see things from different positions like you're talking about, or to advocate for why your position is the right position? You know, that's what we're seeing a lot of right now. It's, you know, it's no one's changing their mind. They're not no one, but there's, you know, especially if you look at social media, it's, you can almost predict how someone's going to respond to anything said because they have their counter and they're just going back and forth. And, you know, so there's not really any, you know, that's not going to be healthy, you know, learning that type of debate, you know, where there's this either or absolutism that kind of comes into play instead of curiosity and, you know, deeper thinking. You know, where's the common ground? There has to be common ground somewhere. We just haven't gone deep enough.
Yes. Instead
of, nope, can't ever agree with that, you know, just disqualifying entire groups of people or, you know, whatever. Yeah. It's an interesting, you know, but everybody's very tense right now. So I think that's part of it. It's hard to, you know, when you're in that survival mode and feeling scared and like you're drowning, it's hard to do more complex thinking than, you know, run away or throw a rock at it, you know?
Yeah. I just had, you know, there's a place for us from West Side Story washing over my whole body where, you know, that somewhere out there, there's a place, and the place needs to be right here. And when we, again, if we can train our children to be the biggest, the absolute greatest force in the matter of their own life, they'll be unmessable.
Yep.
They will be unmessable.
Yeah.
So be able to listen to all sides, all points of view, not be afraid that someone is going to convince you with their slippery, silver tongue, that you're wrong and they're right. And now you have to not only adopt, but you have to join their side and take up their silly shenanigans. But I agree with you, Ken. I think there are enough sources out there to allow people with a point of view to be able to factually say, this got reported over here, and that's what I'm saying to you. I'm not making this up. I read it, okay? Historians are saying X, Y, Z, right? Yeah. And guess what? There are enough people publishing enough stuff on both sides that whatever anybody believes, they've earned it, They put the time in, they listened to things, they critically thought about it in their own mind, but what they didn't hear was any opposing point of view, or give it the opportunity, to gestate or to percolate, or for it to touch who they are as a person, as opposed to allowing it to make them angry or upset or that sort of a thing. So, do you need to get on to other things, Mr. Ken?
I do. Yes. Unfortunately, today I had too many things scheduled, all overlapping.
Well, we're really glad to have you here. And as usual, it's a ball. So we have a couple of more minutes. And if you need to go ahead and sign off to do whatever you need to do, thank you for stopping by. It was great spending time with you again.
I'm going to do that, and we'll see you guys next week.
You got it. Bye for now.
Bye-bye. So,
Lisa, your whole adult life, you've been doing all this media stuff. And so now, when did you get involved with Epic?
About 2 years ago.
Yeah. And you just seemed to me to be an extremely happy camper. When I first met you at Jenny Hardy's evening group, and we started talking, about the law of attraction and listening to the unseen and all these other crackpot ideas that I have. What you show up as a finished product human being that is just as happy as she can be doing what you're doing right now.
I think, well, thank you for saying that, but to be quite vulnerable, I'm not sure if everybody in my life would agree with that. And I think that's actually been a catalyst for me as well, because I remember it was my brother-in-law's sister that once just happened to, by chance or just in passing, saying, "You don't seem happy," and it bothered me, and so I think that, like, to disprove that and everything else, it was like, but I did have to as you probably know, get out of my corporate head and into other things to kind of harmonize my life. And I think I can honestly say that without Epic during this whole pandemic, I might be telling a different story right now, because it's got me, it's kept me involved with community and speaking to people about where they are, how the world looks to them, business wise and personally. I've had a lot of conversations with people. So that keeps me inspired and going, and basically, yes, happy.
Yeah. And I just want to put a plug in for Epic. I actually published a work of nonfiction, which is more or less the story of how I met my wife, first in a dream when I was 12 years old, and then how I met her again when I was 18 at a dorm party. That was fulfilling to be able to write that out. It was the first time I'd ever written this story down, and then to see it published and be able to go back and look at it and read it again. It's impactful. So there are some of you out there that are listening right now that will want to get in touch with Lisa and let her know that you have something to contribute because you're interested in empowering communities, and individuals. So Anything else before we wrap this up? We'll go on to the next side. And I have some interesting things that I would like to speak with you about that will change the world, Lisa.
Awesome.
All right. Well, that's it for us for right now for this segment. And we will catch you on the flip side where we're going to get into some detail. And we had a one-on-one between Ken and I, but Lisa and I have not had a one-on-one in this context, and I'm really looking forward to it. So don't miss this. Bye for now. See you soon.
You've been listening to Lighting the Candle, A World That Works, part of the Exvadio Podcast Network. You can hear us at exvadio.com/podcasts, Apple Podcasts app, Google Play, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, and wherever you find podcasts.